Well, thank you, Dean Jensen. I'm very honored to be here today with all of you. I appreciate the support of the deans. Dean Jensen, that was a very nice intro. Dean Wilding was one of my favorite professors while I was here in the chemical engineering department. I've enjoyed getting to know Dean Trent over the last few years, and most importantly, I'm grateful to be with you as students and part of the BYU community. I've been a BYU guy my entire life. Both of my parents graduated from BYU. Dad, you really rock those plaid pants. I don't know that many of you are probably wearing plaid pants today. They moved away for graduate school, and then we moved back to Orem when I was 7, and my dad started teaching here at BYU. He's still teaching here, and one of my favorite jokes is I think that I'm going to probably retire before he does. For a year during high school, my family moved out of the country, and I was able to live with my aunt, who's also here with us today, while she taught at BYU. Most of my siblings are BYU graduates. My wife, Jolene, who's here with me today, she and I met at BYU. Our oldest child, Amanda, was born while we were BYU students, and then she's a graduate of the computer engineering department. She graduated during COVID in our living room. We have 2 children who are current BYU students, so 2 plus 1. One of our son Jacob, who's here, and his wife Aubrey. They got married this summer. They're BYU students, and our son Curtis, who's on a mission in the Philippines, went here for a year. We've had football season tickets for years, even when we lived on the East Coast, and I look forward to being back on campus every summer, soaking in the atmosphere of BYU. So I think I made my point. BYU is in my blood, and I hope it is in yours. When you think about my decision to become an engineer, I really lucked into becoming an engineer. I loved math and science in high school. Chemistry was my favorite subject, but I really didn't know anything about what engineers did. So I had to go to my counseling office in high school, and there are these things that they had in there called books, where we actually open it up. We didn't get to Google or no internet searches. We had to look through different careers, what the opportunities were, what kind of companies they were, what schools, what kind of salaries happened. So I went through that, and I decided to choose chemical engineering without knowing anything about it. Thankfully, when I got to school, I loved my classes. I loved the practical application of using math to solve problems. I loved how much the professors cared about the material and making sure that we understood it. I loved how the Career Center and the on-campus recruiters helped me get an internship, which I highly recommend and was very pivotal for me. And I realized that I loved using engineering in an industrial setting. So during the short time we have together today, I want to share some parts of my journey in my career. From those days here at BYU to where I am today. If I'm successful, maybe I'll even get some of you interested in oil and gas, or at least the rest of you convinced that it is not an industry that'll die away in the next 5 years. And I hope for all of you, maybe at least a couple of the thoughts that I share will be helpful to you on your own journey. So after graduation, I went to work for Exxon in their Benicia refinery as a process engineer. So Benicia is in Northern California. I was really excited to start my career using my newly minted engineering skills in the energy space. So this is a picture of the refinery. You can see it was a beautiful place. The local code required the refinery to be painted green and yellow, so everything above a certain elevation was green, because those distillation columns and reactors really looked like trees when they're painted green. And then everything else was painted gold to fit in for any of you in Northern California, right? There's a reason it's called the Golden State, besides just the gold rush. After the rainy season ends, really the hillsides there turn gold. So it was a beautiful place, a great place to start my career. So one of the reasons I went to work for Exxon was my fascination with the energy industry. Right out of college, I didn't understand the global economy or how geopolitics fit in, or what OPEC was, or how different prices in the energy space were set. But I had the sense that producing energy was very important to each of our lives. And having a job that in some small way used my engineering degree to maybe make some positive contributions in that space would lead to an interesting career. So at the beginning here, I'll just spend a few minutes. I promise I won't have too many charts and graphs, but talking about energy and oil and gas and how the oil and gas supply chain works. So this is a chart over the last 100 years. This is global population. And so you can see in the last 100 years, global population has quadrupled. Well, energy use has increased more than that. So it might be hard to see, but these stacked little areas are different components of what contribute to that energy use. So oil usage, we're really at the beginning of this century, it was all the energy came from burning wood or coal. And then maybe in the 40s and 50s, oil started becoming more prevalent. And then in the 60s, gas and hydropower really started becoming more prevalent. Nuclear in the 70s, and then really since 2000, wind and solar have really contributed to the overall energy production in the world. So there are many different ways that we can measure the benefits of energy for the global population, but for this discussion, I chose GDP per capita. So if you think about that, this is really the amount of value as measured by GDP per person on the earth. So even with increasing population, we can see as energy usage has increased over the last 100 years, kind of the wealth generated per person on the earth, even with a growing population, has also increased. So even when you highlight the benefits we've all received from increased energy availability, a fair question to ask is, are there other impacts to this, right? So 50 years ago, the primary question that was asked really related to energy cost and availability, right? Some of us in this room maybe remember the oil embargo of the 70s. But because of those constraints on supply and availability of energy during that time, a growing focus on energy efficiency began to develop. And so that's what this chart represents, is energy usage per capita. So you can see since the 1970s that energy usage per person has really stayed relatively flat. So even though energy usage has increased, the economic gains from energy have required or have delivered more efficiency. So specifically, if you look at these bottom four areas, the usage per capita of wood, biomass, coal, oil, and gas has been really flat over the last, call it 5 decades. And any of the growth has come from these more renewable sources of energy. So this is a very relevant topic. If any of you were thinking about going into the energy space, you 100% should be thinking of these kind of issues. And where is energy coming from, and how renewable is it, and what does the future look like? More importantly, there are many experts and politicians. As an aside, unfortunately, I don't think the Venn diagram between experts and politicians has much overlap. But they're debating energy policy and making choices that all of us are going to have to live with as they lay out strategies to reduce carbon emissions across the globe. So I guess the point I want to leave you with here is there are thorny and thoughtful questions here that need to be answered. And I think having an engineering degree, like many of you have, will put you in a great position to contribute to that debate and progress in these areas. So as we look forward, particularly folks in oil and gas, which is the part of that energy balance that I've spent my whole career in, there are many future views on energy and whether oil and gas is going to continue to be a significant part of this. So I think my point here, there are three different forecasts, and these are three very different groups that have put these forecasts together. The one on the left is from the U.S. Department of Energy. The one in the middle is from OPEC. And the one on the right is the International Energy Agency, which is a European-based agency. And so they have a much more, I think, forward, more renewable, lower carbon bent. So clearly their forecast of oil and gas use is lower than the others. So my point isn't to debate which of these forecasts is correct. It's to point out that no matter what your source is, I think there's something to be learned of as you're looking at interesting topics, that you should consider looking at various different sources, right? Not just looking at one, but that if you look at various sources related to any topic, and energy in this case is one, they all agree that oil and gas is going to be part of the future as we go forward over the coming decades. So when we talk about oil and gas, it's really made up of a number of different industries. So if you think about, some of you may have heard these terms, some of you may not have. If you think about upstream, that really talks about producing oil and gas from the ground. Then you're going to have something called midstream that transports that energy. Midstream transports that energy from where it's produced to what we will call downstream, where you have someone processing it. So in that case, maybe an oil refinery, maybe a gas processing plant. Fancy chart, right? Upstream, midstream, downstream. Then you'll have another section that we call midstream that transports the fuel from the processing plants or the refinery to the end-use market and consumers. So when I graduated, I went to work in the downstream space in an oil refinery. So taking crude oil in the front end as a raw material, it used many complex and capital-intensive processes to turn that oil into usable products, right? So from methane, ethane, propane, butane, to gasoline, to jet fuel, to diesel, all the way down to heavy fuel oils and asphalts. And then many of the chemicals in refineries are also fed to make chemical production. Okay, so coming right out of college and starting work in the industry was a transition. I'll be honest, I loved not having to come home and do homework. So there is life after college where you get to come home and your weekends and nights are actually for yourself. I definitely liked the idea of collecting a paycheck instead of paying for tuition. However, supporting around-the-clock operation did have its own challenges, and sometimes there were off-hours work and demands. But it was really rewarding as well. Working in an environment like a refinery, it really built a sense of camaraderie and teamwork where we were supporting something that was important for the community and the broader economy. So less than a year into my career, though, we had to go through a big change. The year before I started my job with Exxon, so I started in 1999, in 1998, Exxon announced that they were merging with Mobil. That deal closed shortly after I started to work the next summer. And as a condition of approving that deal, the U.S. government, the Federal Trade Commission, required ExxonMobil to divest or to sell the refinery where I was working. So imagine you work hard, go to school, go to work for a big company, you're excited, and then 4 months later you're like, oh, you're being sold. So needless to say, it was a time of awakening to the realities of how business operates, a lesson that I've learned many times over throughout my career. It was a scary time, but looking back and having the benefit of hindsight, having Valero purchase that refinery was one of the best things that ever happened for me and my family and my career. This is a good time to pause and share one of the keys to success that I learned and something that helped me handle transitions like the one I just described. And that's the value of mentorship. So both on the receiving and the giving end, I think in the seats where you sit, primarily you'll be receiving mentorship, but hopefully sometime during your career, or maybe even in your life experience, or you'll have the opportunity to give back. So some of you may know this man, Dr. Richard Rowley. So he was one of my professors while I was here at BYU, and he was an excellent teacher. I don't know if I have any chemistry professors in here. I don't want to offend our chemistry department, but I am extremely grateful that I had Dr. Rowley to teach me thermo for everything I did not learn in physical chemistry from our chemistry department. So he was very good at what he did, and he cared about his students. But he was also an excellent researcher. Even as an undergraduate student, he gave me the opportunity to work in his research lab. I'm sure that part of him was hoping that I would stay and do my graduate program there with him and maybe in his lab, but he gave me some real work to work on. And after doing both the research with Dr. Rowley and then an internship in industry, I realized that going into industry was a better fit for me than research. And the thing I loved about Dr. Rowley is once I made that choice and I communicated that to him, it did not change our relationship at all in terms of what he taught and how he mentored me. So it was apparent to me that all the thoughts and time that he spent with me wasn't for any benefit that he might get. It was really for my benefit, and I'm grateful to that. So a true mentor is selfless and willing to help others for their good and not what they're looking to get out of it. Then I get to my first job in Benicia. And this man right here, his name's Mike Goring. So he was an operations manager in the refinery. He was a BYU grad, and he decided to take me under his wing. I think part of it, he didn't have a choice. I was the young engineer that was supporting his area of the refinery. So I still remember to this day, the first week I was there, I didn't even know where to eat lunch or how to fill out all my forms I needed to with human resources. But he sat me down, and for a couple hours, he wrote down on a piece of paper handwritten notes on things that I should take into account in my career. And I still have those pieces of paper in my files. One of the most important pieces of advice that he spent a lot of time giving me that I still use to this day is the importance of communication. And figuring out in everything you're trying to do, should you set up a meeting? Should you call them on a phone? In today's technology, should I send that person a text? Or should I walk down to their office? Should I send them an email? And focusing on communicating to achieve the objective you want. Later, I had the chance to work for Mike again in another job, and he provided me the opportunity to grow my responsibility. And one of the things I appreciated most about him is he gave me the respect to, when I screwed up, he would very clearly tell me. And he gave me very clear feedback, which was helpful. The final mentor I put on this page was later in my career, and his name's Rich Margolisi. When I first started in Benicia, Rich was the refinery manager. In those days, young engineers, they didn't really meet the refinery manager. His office, we called it, was in the deep carpet. You went down the hall and there was deep carpet, and you didn't walk down the deep carpet. But one of the things he did to make himself more accessible is that he wrote handwritten notes. Back then we did a lot of things in writing. You'd have memos or reports you put together, and he'd just send back a handwritten note to you when he thought you did a good job. And that was impactful to me as a young engineer, and that's something that I've tried to do later in my career, send handwritten notes to people when they've done a good job. Now, building this relationship with Rich, later he ended up moving to our corporate headquarters and became the chief operating officer of Valero for the entire company, and he played a role in my next few moves. So these are three, and I could have chosen many others. These are three mentors that made a difference in my career. You should find a mentor at different stages of your life and listen to them. You don't have to do everything they say, but listen to them and take that advice and build those relationships. And most importantly, find someone who will tell you the truth. Not what you want to hear, or not what they want to have happen, but someone who will give you some objective views on what's going on in your life. One of the great things about being here at BYU is that we can talk about our entire authentic selves, right? So I'm talking about my career, but I think the spiritual mentorship in our lives is an important component that we have to always remember. Last year, we had the benefit, we live in Dallas, and Dean Bridget Madrian, the Dean of the Business School, she came down and spoke to some alumni. And I had the privilege, Jolene and I were there and heard her talk about her new mission, vision, and values for the business school. And they really resonated with me. And the thing I loved is at the business school, they fully embraced this view of we aspire to transform the world through Christ-like leadership. And I think we can, maybe we have some business students in here, but we as engineering students, I think we can take that on ourselves as well. I found in my career that I can stand as a follower of Christ and be respected for those beliefs and have self-confidence that no matter what happens, I have Christ in my corner. I don't know anything more powerful than that. He's also the ultimate source of truth when we're looking for ways to make ourselves better. So during my last few years in Benicia, I studied at UC Berkeley, which was a great school, a little bit different than BYU. And I did their evening MBA program. And when I graduated, I was ready for my next role. So in Valero, that often meant moving to headquarters in San Antonio. So one of the skills of developing, one of the values, I guess, of developing that mentor relationship is that in addition to the skills that you develop through the mentor, it often leads to career opportunities. And so I had the opportunity to go work for Rich in San Antonio. So one of the great things about that assignment was that I knew what my next job would be. It was really a one-year assignment. It was a coveted position. It was an opportunity to come into headquarters and learn how the business ran, and then you would go back out to one of the other refineries in a leadership role. So if I look at myself, it's like, how did I get selected for that job? And maybe something more applicable to you is what are key traits so that you can be the kind of person that leaders want to work for them? When I was getting ready for this talk, I actually had the opportunity to watch a lot of videos of past alumni speakers, and it's interesting to me that many of them had very different career paths. So I'm sharing with you my career path today, but there's no one right answer on what that looks like. But I share this list with you that I'll show you in a minute, is that you can't map out what your career looks like, but I think there's some key themes and principles that you can use that will help all of you in your career. The first key is to focus on your current job and be excellent. Whenever I'm looking for someone to promote or take on additional responsibilities or give a new responsibility to, I always start by looking around with those that are doing very well in their current role. I think too often people focus on, oh, this is what I want to do next. And they don't spend enough time focusing on, I'm going to get really, really good at what I'm doing right now. So it's important to keep both things in focus, but what you do down the road pales in importance to you focusing on here and now and standing out not because of your aspirations, but because of your contributions that you're making. So the second attribute that I'll share is having a desire to win. So the definition of winning is different for every person. But it means showing your ability to understand what's important to whoever you're working for and delivering those results. It means solving problems. It's one of the reasons why we love hiring engineers into our company, because they're able to solve problems. Then finally, the next one is making sure that you're not winning at the expense of others, but that you're making others around you better. I'm going to talk later about what it means to be part of a winning team. And so we've all heard stories of people that personally excel, but you want to make the people around you better. And then the final idea is to build skill and influence. One of the things I like to say in today's job market, your job security are the skills that you have. So The more skill you have, the more you can contribute to your current employer, the more likely you are to be promoted or have a career in your current job. But if you need to make a change and you need to go somewhere else, you're going to be more marketable in that case. In addition, I've found ways in my career to have greater influence than maybe my job would dictate. So instead of focusing on talking to people and figuring out how to get promoted, build your skill and influence, and you'll be able to take advantage of opportunities when they come. So my time in San Antonio, it was short. It was less than a year, but it was a very interesting part of my career. I was almost always the junior guy in the room. Rich, once a month, Rich would have all the refinery managers of all their 20-so refineries come into San Antonio, and I was the guy putting the charts together. And one of the favorite charts that they put together was you'd pick a metric and you'd rank all 20 refineries from top to bottom. So inevitably, once a month, I'd have 10 of these refinery managers not very happy with whatever I was putting together because it highlighted that they were underperforming relative to their peers. So I had to build skill in being able to have good relationships with them because my next job was going to go work for one of these guys, and I didn't know who it was. But it was a formative opportunity for me, and after a year of working in headquarters, it was time to move on. I remember going home and telling Jolene we had the opportunity to move to Delaware, and she said something like, I know Delaware's a state, but people actually live there? I've never heard of anyone that lives there. So do we have anybody from Delaware here today? Yeah, I think that proves the point, right? So we loved our time living on the East Coast, but working at Delaware City was probably the hardest part of my career. So when we first moved there, I was responsible for about a third of the refinery operations in the refinery. I had about 100 union operators, and during the few years that I was in that job, we had a lot of maintenance activities. We called them turnarounds. We had a lot of capital projects that we put in, and we had a lot of major reliability issues during that time. So up to that point, my career had been full of success. I had this coveted job in San Antonio. They spun me out to a refinery. And now, for the first time, I remember my performance review after one of those big capital projects and turnarounds and being told that I was performing below expectations. And I remember sitting there, and in my mind, I was thinking of all the things of like, well, yeah, this happened, and that wasn't my fault, and this happened, and that wasn't my fault, or how was I supposed to impact this? And it was the first time where really internally, I had to really internalize, I'm in charge of this, even though I can't do all this myself. I have to work through other people. So it was a tough pill to swallow. I remember recuperating from that experience. We decided as a family, as Dean Jensen said, we love to ski, so we went on a ski trip to Vermont. And I still remember coming back from that ski trip in Vermont, and we'd been home, I don't know, for a few hours, and I got a call from the refinery, and there was some sort of reliability issue at the refinery. Well, that turned into, I think I spent the next 45 or 50 days in the refinery dealing with that issue. So that time, it seemed like that it was a never-ending challenge as we had that shut down, and then that turned into another turnaround. And then when we tried to restart the unit, there was unexpected fire on that unit, and so we had to go repair that damage. So needless to say, that kind of consumed my life. Maybe. Nothing. There we go. So as a result of all those challenges, I was eventually moved out of my position. I affectionately call this time in my career my penalty box assignment. So I was put in the penalty box. It's like, you're doing really well, but man, you've had some bad results right here, so we're going to put you in the penalty box and see if you're able to recover. So I remember this picture here. These were the guys on one of the unit that we worked with, and I spent a lot of time with them. And this was kind of the last day that we were together on the unit. In some sense, it's kind of like if you think about, I'm going to make some analogies to sports here in a minute. If you think about a sports team, if you're Sometimes if you have a losing team, you have to change out the coach or the general manager. You may or may not be, you may actually be a good coach or general manager, even though I'll tell you from personal experience it doesn't feel like it at the time. So the good thing is, I went in my penalty box assignment and I decided, well, the only thing, I took my own advice, right? I said the only thing I can do right now is do the best job I can in this role. And that's what I did. And so 4 or 5 months later, I was promoted to be the engineering director. Well, the final piece to that story in Delaware City, unfortunately, was a few months after I was promoted to be engineering director, the company decided to shut the refinery and everyone lost their jobs at the refinery. So another example of where personally I had leaned in and I'd given what I needed to and found some personal success, but the realities of business stepped in. This was right after the financial crisis of 2008, and East Coast refining was tough. So we had a choice as a family. I could go back to San Antonio with Valero or stay on the East Coast. So if I think about this time in the challenges that I went through during this time of my career, some of you guys have had challenging times in your life as well. So if you think about the most challenging or the most impactful times in your life, they probably also happen to be some of the most challenging ones. So you might, if you look backwards, you might not choose to redo those experiences, but they had a lasting impact on you. So remember that. I've talked about this already, but it's an unfortunate fact of life in industry that results matter more than effort. It's interesting because in our faith and in our church life, that's not true. I think Christ looks at our heart and cares more about our effort than what our results are. That's not how business works, right? So being able to understand that reality will get you through many career challenges. And then finally, I think as part of that, you have to build emotional resilience. I love these verses in James, where James talks about that really going through difficult times and building that resiliency, you become more complete or whole. And the Lord cares, He wants to make us better people. And sometimes we just have to accept that those bad things will happen, and all we get to control is how we respond to them. So as we were thinking about what to do next, I was introduced to Sunoco. So after a lot of thought and prayer, I made the move, and it wasn't far away, and we stayed on the East Coast, and I went to Sunoco. So when I joined Sunoco, I spent the first couple of years supporting refinery, but they had a lot of the same challenges in refining that Valero had. So I took a job as a commodities trader. Sunoco had started selling off or shutting down their refineries, and I decided I need to do something different, and being in the commercial side of the business was something that I'd always wanted to do and I had not had a chance to. So the way I thought about it was it's an opportunity for me to build skill and learn something that I wanted to do. So as an aside, when I turned 40, I became a runner. We had a group of friends in our ward that were runners, and they wanted to run a Ragnar race. Anybody here run a Ragnar race? Yeah, we have some Ragnar runners here too. So for those who haven't, on the surface it sounds totally crazy. You get a group of 12 people, and you get them and you split them up in 2 vans, and you run 200 miles. And for us, it took about 30 hours. And so Ragnar's a lot of things. It's mainly a sleep deprivation exercise, but it's a team building opportunity. But one of the coolest things you get to do on a Ragnar is because you're running it overnight, everyone gets to run a night race or a night leg. I'd never, even when I became a runner, I'd never run at night all by myself with a headlamp on, out on the open road and with not very many people around you. It's hard to describe, but unless you've done it, it's one of the most serene experiences I've ever had in my life, and I've been able to do it a couple of times. If I wouldn't have said yes to that opportunity, I never would have had that chance. So the same thing happened in my career. About a year after taking that trading job, Sunoco was sold. there's a theme here in my career to another company called Energy Transfer. And this trading job where I'd left being the head of a department to just be a commodities trader, at that point I was promoted to be the vice president of that supply and trading group in the new organization. I had no idea that was going to happen, but if I had not said yes to that opportunity, I wouldn't have had that benefit on the back end. So during this change, it wasn't just a new role for me, but it was a change in company strategy. And so we had the opportunity to rebuild a team. So one of the last things I want to share is this idea of joining. You want to join a high-functioning team when you go to work for someone, not a family. A lot of companies talk about a family. I'm not trying to talk down on any companies that talk about it that way. For me, it resonates a lot more to say I want to be part of a high-functioning team, right? Do I want to be part of our champion women's soccer team, or do I want to be the crazy uncle in a family? Right? You don't get to choose members of our family. We have to love them, but I'm guessing that most of us have family members we might not want to work with. Maybe if you can't think of that, maybe you're the person that other people don't want to work with. Okay? And then on a team, you don't want to be, a kid's peewee football team. You want to be one of the best football teams. And yes, even though we live in Dallas, we're still huge Philadelphia Eagles fans. So, and you think about the concept of why. Well, team members are accountable to each other. They're not just accountable to the coach. Everyone has to earn their right on the team every day. You have people paid a lot of different amounts on the team, but every role is important if the team is going to achieve success. And I could give a lot more analogies on why I think as you're looking for a place to work, you want to be part of a high-functioning team. So one of the last lessons that I'll share is this idea of going forth to serve. So we had the opportunity, as our kids have come in to go to BYU, we take a picture right at the entrance, and you have this section of go forth to serve. What does it mean to go forth? I mean, I grew up in Utah County. I'll maybe some of you will disagree with me, but I'll maybe plant the idea that maybe it means leave Utah County, right? But maybe it's not geographic. Maybe it means, hey, I'm going to try something that's a little scary for me or something a little different. This idea of going forth, you have to put yourself in a situation where you have to push yourself. And then you have the opportunity to serve. So there were two opportunities that I had to serve that were unexpected. When we were on the East Coast, when we were making that decision whether to stay or not, we decided to stay, and I changed companies. But then a few months later, I was called to serve as bishop of our ward and had that opportunity. And then a few years later, we decided to move our family to Pennsylvania. And we had the opportunity to participate in the Philadelphia Temple Open House. So these are a few opportunities that we had in our family that I wanted to share. In the last few years, we've moved to Dallas, and I want to skip through to the end here. And so as I leave you today, I just want to leave you with a few takeaways. Remember that energy is super important. It fuels everything we do. And oil and gas is going to be a big part of that energy equation going forward. Make sure you find a mentor. Be the kind of person that leaders want to work for them. Lean into those hard and challenging times that you have. Say yes to opportunity. Seek out and join a high-performing team, not a family, and go forth to serve. I've enjoyed our time together today. I hope that as you look forward in your future, that you take these next steps and have success. Thank you.